2023, like 2021 and 2018, has a bevy of quarterback prospects that are likely going in the top 10. Between Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson, the belief around the league is that these four are going very early. Even a guy like Hendon Hooker could be a late first-round pick, who knows? But in today's video, we're going to try and predict the landing spots for the top 4 quarterbacks in this class and what their outcome might be based on their situation. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Leave a like, it always helps out, and let's get into it. We'll start with pick number 1, which is where we should see our first quarterback go off the board. I get the size concerns, but me personally, I'm taking Bryce Young here at number 1 overall for the Panthers, and I ultimately think he ends up there in real life. When the Panthers first traded up, it seemed like the buzz was around CJ Stroud and even Anthony Richardson, but for some odd reason, Bryce Young's name was just not mentioned as often. Frank Reich, who of course took over as the Panthers head coach this offseason, had typically ran a West Coast offense during his stint with the Colts. He has only had bigger quarterbacks throughout his head coaching career, from Jacoby Brissett to Andrew Luck to Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz and recently Matt Ryan. But then again, how many small quarterbacks are out there that are even good? Maybe a handful? It's not like Frank Reich went out of his way to avoid smaller quarterbacks, there just happens to be way more bigger quarterbacks at that position. Anyway, Young would be put in a situation in Carolina that's not too desirable, especially with DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey gone. But Young is one of those special quarterbacks that can elevate talent around him. Young is probably the best playmaker in this draft, the best at the line of scrimmage, the best at maneuvering in the pocket, and just smooth in everything he does. Aside from his height and weight, it's really hard to find any cons in his game, if any. But with smaller quarterbacks going first overall in recent years, like Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, I think the stigma around those smaller quarterbacks is going away. Bryce Young can change the trajectory of a franchise, and Carolina is hoping he can do that. At number 2, I'm giving the Houston Texans CJ Stroud. Stroud did have the luxury of throwing to a bunch of receivers that will be first-round picks, and 2 already have been first-round picks in Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. JSN's bound to be a first-rounder this year, and Marvin Harrison Jr. may end up being drafted higher than all those guys by next season. The Texans are another ugly situation for a quarterback to jump into, but with new head coach DeMeco Ryans locked up for over 5 years, hopefully there's enough stability there for CJ Stroud. His receivers would be Robert Woods, Nico Collins, Brevin Jordan, and a nice young running back in Dameon Pierce. Most who cover the draft will agree that Stroud is the safest and most sure thing amongst the top 4 quarterback prospects, but does not possess the ceiling that Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and some may argue Will Levis even have. Stroud will give you great ball placement, anticipation throws, touch throws, and the rushing ability to keep defenses on their heels. If I were Houston though, I would be tempted with Anthony Richardson, but for a franchise like this that just needs stability, you can't go wrong with CJ Stroud. But remember, DeMeco Ryans and some of these new coaches just came over from the 49ers organization, the same organization that traded up for a toolsy quarterback in Trey Lance just 2 years ago. Crazier things have happened, I guess. Now things get interesting. The 3rd overall pick belongs to the Arizona Cardinals, who recently extended Kyler Murray and are in a prime position to trade back. If I were Atlanta or Vegas, I would strongly consider moving up, but in this exercise, I'm going to give that to the Seahawks, jumping up 2 spots from 5 to 3 in order to draft Anthony Richardson. Why does it make sense? Well, from Arizona's perspective, 2023 is a wash, and you're just looking to accumulate as many good pieces in this draft as you can. If Arizona moves to 5, they then have Seattle and Indianapolis in front of them, 2 teams that are almost guaranteed to take a quarterback, especially if Seattle does in fact trade up. And why does it make sense for Seattle? We do know Richardson is going to need a year on the bench in all likelihood, and thanks to the Russell Wilson trade, they have the extra assets to make that trade. They can move up 2 spots and probably won't have to sacrifice too much. Geno Smith is going to start for the Hawks in 2023 and maybe even 2024 if he continues to play like he did last year. Richardson has the highest ceiling in this draft, and maybe for all positions, not just quarterback. You know, Pete Carroll loves to run the ball, and I'm sure having another elite rusher at quarterback just like Russell Wilson in his younger days is something he's going to be gravitated towards. And I know the concerns for Richardson as a passer are there, but I really don't think his floor as a passer is as low as people make it sound. He did well in the intermediate passing game, but ironically, it's the short passes under 10 yards that he seems most inconsistent with. There are no physical limitations, and if he's coached right and mentored by a mature Geno Smith, the sky is the absolute limit alignment for Anthony Richardson. Just imagine an Anthony Richardson, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett offense. That could be dangerous. And last of the four is Will Levis, who we'll have going to the Indianapolis Colts. Funny enough, a comp I like for Will Levis is Carson Wentz, who the Colts had, of course, in 2021. And although it didn't end too well, Carson Wentz put up pretty good numbers and had a 9-win season with Indianapolis. Levis is definitely an interesting case. He was arguably better in 2021 than 2022, but he did have one of the most underwhelming supporting cast out there in college football, including a dreadful offensive line. He has the arm talent and size you desire and can be a great downfield passer and definitely has some rushing ability. He does have some flaws, like over-relying on his arm. His accuracy and footwork are pretty inconsistent, but whichever team drafts him should be confident they can coach those things out of him. The Colts' new head coach, Shane Steichen, just came over from the Eagles, and we saw a lot of reliance on the RPO and big plays with their passing attack, and their offense did include some quarterback runs with Jalen Hurts. Will Levis can probably fit into what they want, and he may just be their guy. And whoever gets drafted to Indy will have a decent situation to work with. Jonathan Taylor, who led the NFL in rushing in 2021, you have Michael Pittman, who's a real wide receiver 1, second-year receiver Alec Pierce, and a tight end group of a bunch of former basketball players, and an offensive line that should bounce back after a down year in 2022. Hopefully for them, it's a quick turnaround for a team that had playoff aspirations just one offseason ago. So that's my list of predictions for where the top of this quarterback class will land. Leave in the comments, where do you expect these guys to go? I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys next time.